I am the Deputy Executive Director for Collections and Interpretation. My colleague Phoebe Bean is the Associate Director of the Robinson Research Center. And we're going to be sort of handing back and forth as we go through this very brief presentation, a little bit of history of just a little bit, because we're a historical society, history of our collecting, and then we'll get into some of the things that we've recently acquired and then what we do. So, Connor, if you could share the screen with the presentation, that would be great. So the Rhode Island Historical Society is the fourth oldest historical society in the country. We were founded in 1822. That means that we were in on the ground floor of institutional collecting, in the United States. So next slide, please. So in 1822, and I'll let Phoebe kind of come in really right in a second. In 1822, we did publish basically a want list of what we are collecting, what this new society, which was mostly consisting of lawyers and some businessmen, wanted to do. And really, the idea was to make sure that the revolutionary generation, which was dying off at that point, that their deeds would be remembered. So in this ad in 1822 in the Providence Gazette, it outlines what we want, and it's basically a lot of what we want today. Sketches of towns and villages, businesses, manufacturing, biographical sketches of revolutionary patriots and other distinguished people, letters, documents, papers, etc. So this kind of call was really interesting. Phoebe, do you want to add anything to this particular slide?
I would say that the gentlemen that are listed as the founders were some of the original donors as well of a lot of the material that they were holding basically in their houses at that time, or from local bookshops, local printers, and that those early acquisitions early donations were newspapers and a lot of books, especially English imprints, as well as letters and documents, manuscripts.
Yeah.
Next slide.
So this is our we kind of moved around the first 20 years. I won't go through all the places that we were, but until we had a building of our own. But the first building of our own that we had was the Cabinet Building. It's still there on Waterman Street, right next to the main green. And it still says Historical Society, but we were in that building, which was the first building designed specifically for a historical society in the country from 1844 to about 1944, for 100 years. And somewhere in the 1860s or 70s, we added a wing, and then in the 1890s, we added another wing, but we filled it. And that's what all archives and libraries that collect face, overfilling. As soon as you get a new building, it just seems like a kind of a law of nature that any space you have, you can fill. So we do need to be selective. Next, Phoebe, do you want to add anything to that?
I think that will be emphasized by the photo that follows.
Okay, so
in 2 slides.
So basically, this is a quick timeline of where we are now. 1942, we get the John Brown House offered to us by John Nicholas Brown. So we sell the Cabinet Building to Brown and move everything into the John Brown House. In 1964, the Tockwatton branch of the Providence Public Library becomes available to us, and we buy it and fill that with all of our research material. But the museum objects stay in the John Brown House. 1974, we're offered the Aldrich House by the Rockefeller family. That becomes our headquarters and with some exhibit space. And then in 1997, we work with the city of Woonsocket, and the building there at the Museum of Work and Culture is the city's building, but we run the museum inside that building. Phoebe?
We often meet people who have used the Tockwatton Library when they were young and come to it now as the Historical Society. It contains all of our two-dimensional material, including graphics, film, manuscripts, and then, as Rick was saying, the three-dimensional objects are at the John Brown House in storage or on exhibit.
And the library is basically where people come to encounter the collections. We have a reading room, we have a staff that gives access to a lot of those research collections. We can talk about that later if you like. Next slide. So this is a real quick snapshot of what we have. You can read it yourself, but over 22,000 museum objects, mostly in the John Brown House. 10 million pages of manuscripts. That's an estimate. We haven't counted them, but over 100,000 printed books, well over 400,000 photographs by now, 40,000 prints and drawings, including a lot of architectural drawings, and 9 million feet of moving image film. And this picture is of our cabinet building. Phoebe, do you want to? Yeah.
I think the interesting part with this is people always say, oh, well, it's so crammed. And it wasn't just the style. We were filled almost as soon as they built the building, as Rick was mentioning before. But anyone familiar with some of the Rhode Island Historical Society collections might recognize some of the portraits that are on the wall. We still have the vast majority of all this material, including some of the tables that we still use.
Right. We do not get rid of things very easily, but that's something that we're working on. And not when I say get rid of, I don't mean throw out. I mean, make sure that things have a good home. Next slide, please. So this is a couple of interior shots of our Robinson Research Center. And if it looks full to you, it is. We are at about 160% capacity in our research center. And so we'll be, looking to address that issue in our third century here. You will hear more about that down the road, not in this presentation, but in the years to come. But basically what you're seeing here is part of the film collection, part of the stacks, the book stacks and the manuscripts, and a sort of a big view of the flat material that we have, a lot of those drawings in some of our workspaces. Phoebe?
I think you summed it up.
Okay,
Next
sorry.
slide.
Yep. So in the beginning, one of the big things that historical societies did to provide access to their manuscripts was to publish them in print form. But now we're in the internet age. And so what we do now is a lot of scanning, and we provide online access to collections. And so these are 4 resources that we have. Encompass is an online textbook of Rhode Island history for teachers and students. The Navigator is a kind of a bibliography and reference library online of just Rhode Island history. The Revolutionary War records is just that, scans of pretty much the bulk of our Revolutionary War records. And the historical newspapers, Phoebe, maybe you can talk a little bit about that site.
Yes, we received an NEH grant along with the Library of Congress to digitize the newspapers as part of Chronicling America. We're working with Providence Public Library on that. Many of you may know of our microfilm collection. We hold every known paper that was printed on microfilm in Rhode Island starting in 1732 and up to 2010. They're freely available. They're also the film is sent in preservation copies to Library of Congress so that it's backed up as well. So that's an exciting project that we have. And there are also essays that go with every newspaper. The Revolutionary War records were one of our most popular collections, especially among genealogists and any kind of historian or student of the Revolutionary War. So we really wanted to target that as something to digitize. And it's been very popular. We're still working on the indexing but most soldiers are searchable by name, and we'll continue to build on that.
Yep. And so we are building out a lot of electronic resources. Those newspapers, I believe we're scanning about 50 or 60,000 a year pages.
Yeah, pages.
Yep. So it's a multi-year project. It'll keep going until we're done. But I think there's, what did they estimate, a million pages all told?
At least, yeah.
Something like that.
And then you can go to rinewspapers.org and see the newspapers and some of the information about that project if you're interested. And the Encompass, the Revolutionary War records, and the Rhode Island History Navigator are available through our website.
Right. So next slide. Now that's all what we have been and what we do. And this is what we've been taking in recently. The picture here of this piece of furniture we'll explain in a second, as well as this picture of all of these folio volumes on these shelves. Next slide, please. So this is a quick, very brief list of significant acquisitions that we've had in the past 5 years. The William and Mary trumpet leg high chest of tiger maple, which you just saw. It's a really great example of very early furniture making in Rhode Island, and was given to us by a donor recently. The Narragansett Racetrack Photo Archive, about 20,000 negatives. This was the racetrack that was here from 1932 in Pawtucket to about 1978. And it was their photo archive, which we acquired. Nicholson File Company records, one of our most famous industries here in Rhode Island from the Nicholson family. What you just saw in the previous slide, the stacks of folio volumes was from the Rumford Chemical Company records. We have now over 600 volumes of those records. Minute books from the First Light Infantry Company, and that was kind of like an early police force in Rhode Island and Providence, which includes some of the firsthand accounts of the Snowtown riots and some of the Door War. Woonsocket Call Photo Archive, which is a great example of what happens when a company gets bought out and suddenly they need to deaccession all of their stuff. We get a call and a big collection of material. They just have to make a decision about it, and they offer it to us, and we have to make a decision whether to take it or not. And that's a huge array of photos. Likewise, the records of the Brown and Ives Land Company. Phoebe, do you want to say anything about any of these?
I would say that we also have to pack and move all this material. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the number of volumes. The minute books of the First Light Infantry Company, Rick touched on those, but those are really an amazing acquisition, and do cover the Snowtown riots where they marched down Benefit Street and describe the scene. The Woonsocket Call Photo Archive, as Rick said, was sort of, they wanted to get rid of it. They were giving to different institutions, different newspapers give to different institutions. But we were lucky enough to have it come here, but it needs a lot of work. So these aren't just things that we take in perfect condition, like the high chest of drawers and tiger maple, that's perfect. We could bring things in that are dirty, need to be cleaned, need to be rehoused. And so that goes into the effort of all of these.
There is a lot of work that goes into, yeah, Phoebe's exactly right. Just taking it in is just the first step in a long path of stewardship that we walk down. And it has to do with cleaning and cataloging and storage and providing access. So that's what we do. So it's always great to announce an acquisition, but we try not to announce it too soon because people may want to use it before we're ready to provide access to it. Because you could say, well, I'd like to know what's in that Woonsocket Call archive, and we can say, okay, well, here's 270 boxes. Have a ball, and you're like, well, wait. Don't you have an index? Nope. It's going to take tens of thousands of dollars to create one. So that's what that's kind of what we face when we take these things in. Next slide. Here's a picture of that the records of the Brown and Ives company, which is a great. It's going to be a great archive for people who are studying the expansion into Western lands, because this was a land company that would buy up new lands available from the federal government and then resell it to land developers. So it's for Midwestern lands like Illinois and Nebraska, et cetera, it's going to be a really interesting sort of source for scholars. Next slide.
This was a really fun acquisition, actually, the last one, Rick.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Just because the volumes had been in that location for so long on Main Street, on South Water Street, I mean, on South Main Street.
Yep.
So it was a historic building, a historic business. They had the original desk, which the accountant used or the clerks used. But to be able to get these all together and work on them is going to be great. Next slide.
Yep. Next slide. So now what we very, very occasionally, we will buy something. Okay. For the most part, the flow of gifts to us is tremendous. We estimate about 30% of what's offered to us. So we reject 70%. But of that 30%, by volume, I would say on average, we're offered something every working day. We take in, on average, anywhere from 2 to 4 boxes a week, let's just say. And that's just boxes of paper, whatever. That doesn't include furniture or portraits. There are numbers of those, but for the purposes of understanding, the kind of volume that we're dealing with, it's about 100 to 200 boxes a year. So it's quite a bit of material, and that's being selective, not as selective maybe as we could be, but certainly as selective as we can be right now. So, like I said, occasionally we do buy things, really, really sort of significant things that come up, and sometimes we need help to get them. But this is the Civil War diary of Joshua Ademan, who was a commander of a captain in the 14th Rhode Island Heavy Artillery Colored Unit. That was the name at the time. The 14th Rhode Island Heavy Artillery Regiment was formed in August of 1863. The name was officially changed to the 11th United States Colored Heavy Artillery Regiment in May of 1864. The white officers were all Rhode Islanders, but the enlisted men were recruited from all over the country. And Joshua Ademan, who was born in 1840 in New Zealand, was of English parents, emigrated to America when he was a young boy. He graduated Brown in 1862, returned to Providence after the war, and served as Secretary of State from 1872 to 1887. So this diary, is this great sort of eyewitness sort of testament of, or at least window to one aspect of the Civil War that is just fascinating and very candid. And there's a lot of things that a scholar can do with this diary. And so we're really eager to see work done on it. Phoebe, do you want to add anything to that?
We did have a small collection of Joshua Ademan's papers, but they were mostly related to his work as the Secretary of State of Rhode Island. So this is just an incredible other side to his life and career, and more importantly, to the people that were serving in the artillery regiment, because he does discuss a lot of abuse and negativity that was going on in the regiment towards the soldiers. So it's a complicated history, but very intriguing, and we're really glad that we can preserve it for study.
This came up at auction in New York, and fortunately at that particular auction house, one of our former curators worked there. So he often gives us a heads up as to material that we might be interested in before it's coming up for sale. And so we have a network of people that we talk to throughout the trade and throughout the profession and they know that we're looking for material. So this is how we often find things. Next slide, please, and final slide. So this is a particularly wonderful piece. It's called a pandal. This is a textile. It's a sort of a pictorial blanket dedicated to remembering the rescue and relocation of Southeast Asian families and individuals in Rhode Island at the end of the Vietnam War. According to its donor, the piece is a combination of dyed fabrics arranged as patchwork, embroidered fibers, produced by a group of refugee women in the late 70s and early 80s while receiving aid from a local charity. And so the donor received this, was her husband, and received this and gave it to us. But he received this in acknowledgement of his dedication at helping the relocation and adaptation process of the people coming into Rhode Island from Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laotian, and Hmong. So, Phoebe, do you want to say anything about this, more about this?
I would say that like most of the donations that we get, they are unsolicited and often a surprise and delight. This is definitely one of those pieces. We have very little on the Hmong people. We collect what we can as far as printed material, but there is a community here in Rhode Island that we are very interested in documenting along with other communities.
Yeah. So we are exploring hitherto sort of underrepresented groups in Rhode Island, trying to sort of reach out to those communities, establish, communications and understanding so that we can properly, collect and not, not step on anybody's toes, not seem like we want to do anything other than make sure that the peoples of Rhode Island, the diversity of peoples of Rhode Island are represented sort of equitably in the collection. So there's going to be a lot of work to do on that. But this is kind of some of our represents some of our efforts towards that. So that's really the end of the formal presentation. We're happy to take questions or talk a little bit about what we collect and why. So that's I appreciate your attention. While Connor figures out the the chat. Well, I don't know if there's anything in the chat.
I can add that we intake about, at least last year, for fiscal year 22-23, we took in about 4,400 individual items. And that includes some larger group collections of manuscripts. So to give you an idea of the scale, and that's still when we're rejecting, 70 to 80% of what's offered to us.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to step in quickly for Connor. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat and we will read them aloud. Here's one. Question from Steve. What is the best way to contact you regarding new donated material?
Yep. In terms of material, if you want to donate something, you contact me. And that's just rring@rihs.org. And then we will then I have, we have collection staff, Phoebe and I, and some other people on staff. We basically have a discussion about each item or group of items or whatever. And there's a process.
Great. We have another question from Mary Beth Matosa. Hey, can you comment on the need for the proposed state archive? How would that fit with your collection?
So the state archives proposal is for the state archives. It's for their collections, which we our collections kind of dovetail with them. The state archives collects the archives of the government, and they also collect some ancillary things. But they haven't been around as long as we have. We've been around for a lot longer. So we support them, they support us, but we're not going to be any part of that particular proposal. that really is their focus.
We also, there's a message from someone offering to volunteer that I'll pass on to you directly after the call.
Great.
And any other questions that anyone would like to share? Jordan, just so everyone knows, popped the link into the chat for being able to register for the rest of the programs in the series.
So I hope you all enjoyed that. And if you have any other questions, send us an email. Could you say something about collecting oral histories?
Yes.
We do have oral histories. We do collect oral histories. Phoebe, do you want to talk a little bit about what we have so far, or do you? I'm not sure if.
Yes. Hi, Dr. Malone. How are you? We love oral histories. They're in our MIAC collection, which is the moving image and audio collection. We are working to get those converted to MP3 files. And also we're always working to get transcriptions when we can, because those are really helpful for students and any of our patrons. So there's some wonderful collections already, the labor history, of course, the Folk Life Project. We have some new ones as well that are coming in. So we're still collecting oral histories and just keeping up with the modes of recording technology.
Great. We have another question as well that says, do you reach out to marginalized groups proactively for new items?
Yes. So Sarah, you could probably talk a little bit about the programming side of this and the kinds of partnerships that we have. But we do partner with a wide range of folks across the state routinely. There's a whole list of them. And they do include people in traditionally underrepresented communities, et cetera. Absolutely. One of the things that we want to be careful of, though, is not to be too pushy. We want to be open, welcoming, and we want to, connect with as many people as we can. But I don't know, Sarah, do you want to say anything about some of what we do sort of programmatically?
Yeah, I mean, so I can broadly say that we make it our purpose and our intention to ensure that we're telling the stories of all Rhode Islanders in our programming. So building trust within those communities is a pillar of what we do and takes time. And so, part of that is that we know, hopefully, in being able to steward stories well through programming and partnership, ensuring that we provide opportunities for people to share the stories of their communities themselves, that in building that trust over time, it will mean that they will feel comfortable sharing that material with our collection and seeing us as trustworthy stewards of those stories so that we can collect that material as well. So it's really a long-term process of ensuring that we are being good stewards every step of the way, so that we can long-term be sure that we have materials that reflect those stories in our collections and can tell them not just through programming, but through the material that we have. And Rick can also speak more to what it means for us to be the right space for that, because there are also other organizations that collect that material as well. And so it's also about ensuring that our collections team is constantly doing the work of knowing what is the best home, and that we're providing support and resources for other institutions that may be better positioned to continue to grow those collections, but that they have the support they need from us to be able to care for them in the long term. So I don't know, Rick, if you want to say anything about that.
Yeah, I mean, we have professional relationships with pretty much every collecting institution in the state, the region. We talk to people that have special focuses, ethnic community focuses or whatever. And so we're always making sure that we don't come across as saying, well, we want it all and we should have it all. I mean, that's it's not sustainable for any institution to collect everything. even the Library of Congress. So a lot of that has to do with diplomacy and making sure that we understand the wants and needs of those communities. And that, again, like Sarah said, that takes some talking, and some openness, and some patience. And so a lot of times when this material comes up, because the fashions of collecting being what they are, in recent years, certain kinds of material has become more valuable on the market because of the sort of pressures externally and internally to collect it. So what we try to do, though, is, again, to take the long view. We've been around for 200 years. We want to be around for another 200. So it really is about careful steps and being as just sort of open as you can, transparent. I know that's a lot of vague language, but if you would have an example, somebody might come up with a collection and like, well, yeah, that would be great for us. Is this the best place? Do we understand enough about this collection to properly represent it and to promote it? And if we don't, we better know who does, or if there is a better institution, or we get some expert advice, etc. So
It's a real back and forth,
it is.
listening and communicating and, being open to new angles and new ideas and new concepts. I mean, we always want to be flexible in that way.
And also new vocabulary. A lot of our traditional collections, we've been doing some work recently to just change the search terms, just the cataloging terms, because they're outdated and they're, not really not good language anymore. So that shifts over time. So.
Great. Well, I think those are all of our questions for today.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you all so much for being here. We're excited that you were all here for the kickoff of the series. Thank you again to Rick and to Phoebe for their time. And Rick will be back with us next week as we explore our next theme. And we look forward to hopefully seeing all of you again then. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.